It is so good to see everyone here this morning as you come together, and I know that it's as you're deciding to come together, and this is the Lord's Day, and it is good to see everyone who comes out and meet one another and greet one another. And I have that meeting and greeting kind of decision to make. How social do you be and still keep social distance? And that decision, and it's something that we're working through and still working through. But we're glad to see everyone and glad to have those that we have tuning in on the live stream. We certainly appreciate that. And we know that we have several that come in and make remarks and comments on that, and we appreciate that. Glad to have you. We're talking about in our series of raising family and raising kids and something, and how do we do this and work through this and such. And it's a situation. We're having a series of this. The first lesson we had was on Psalm 127, that the home is made up of father and mother and children, and that's God's plan for the home. And then the next lesson we talked about Mary and Joseph raising Jesus, and there are others, but particularly we talked about raising Jesus, and they had problems in their marriage, or certainly circumstances in their marriage which could have been problems, and they worked through these. And Mary and Joseph were given a great responsibility of raising Jesus, the Son of God. And we know that Jesus fed the 5,000, and yet Mary and Joseph fed Jesus. Great responsibility that they had. And so we're talking about raising children and 7 Proverbs. I wanted to go to the book of Proverbs and raising children, and we just are using 7 of them this morning. There are many, many, many more that we could have as far as Proverbs and using and raising children and about the home and advice for that and the situation there. So we're talking about raising our kids using the book of Proverbs. My personal advice, I said I am not an expert as far as raising kids. I have 2 wonderful daughters Julie and I are very proud of, and really the best decision I made in being a parent and was to marry someone like Julie that would tell me, hey, calm down, it's all right, it's not as bad as you think it is. And so that was her responsibility as far as me, because I would just be going off the handle as far as situations. And Julie would say, calm down, it's all right, things will be all right. And if I had known my girls were going to be as good as they are now, I wouldn't have worried so much when they were growing up. And so sometimes I would just fly off the handle, and Julie would say, calm down. It takes 2 to be successful in that. And so you together raise the family. 7 Proverbs it is. The first one, of course, is train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from this. And so we understand, and I thought I would lead with this because maybe out of the book of Proverbs, this is the most often quoted scripture in raising children. And so several things we want to look at. Train up a child in the way that he should go. One particular writer would talk about training up a child and just talking about using the word training, and like a train on the railroad tracks, is there is a purpose and there's a way that we should go. And it's a one-way street. Don't deviate from this, as a train does not deviate from its tracks. If it does, it's off and it doesn't go well. Train up a child in the way that they should go. This is character training also, along with spiritual training of who they are and who they need to be and how they're going to be in adults. Character training of honesty and integrity, and letting them know how they should be as people growing up, and at their character in life. Train them. It does not automatically come, right? You're just not automatically good people whenever it is that you were born. Train them. Train them spiritually also. Bring them up in the right way. Setting the foundation is what this is talking about. Because we understand, and of course whenever we preach on this particular lesson, and that we have people, and I have known couples, and you have known couples, that they would have children, and maybe they just have 2 children. And one of them, they train them in the way that they should go, and they're good and faithful and following Christ now, and the other one is not, who has rebelled against authority and rebelled against the church, and they don't attend anymore. And you would say, how is it that the same parents teaching the same thing, and one child continues and one child rebels? It happens, doesn't it? And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but right now our responsibility, so we know that this is not 100%, well, I taught my children, why is it they're not faithful now? But the proverb is true. Whenever you teach them and bring them up and lay that foundation, they build upon that. And so train up a child in the way that he should go. It takes training. It takes consistency in that training. Just like a train running up on a track, you see that consistency and consistency and consistency in training. And that's where husband and wife need to be on the same page. And that's why I say Julie kept me on the same page a lot. That we need harmony in that parenting whenever we're training up a child, in that consistency. And you know, parents, you were raised by different parents. And so when you come together, you need a one philosophy in raising your children. Train up a child in the way that he should go. We don't need mom teaching one way and dad teaching another way and pulling apart. We need that consistency. And so from this verse, parents, come together. Be one in raising your children. Train them up in a consistent way that they should go. And when they're old, they'll not depart. Proverb number 2. It says, whoever spares the rod hates his son, but whoever loves him is diligent to discipline him. Now, we could go with the saying, spare the rod and spoil the child, right? I just saw Lynn Dillon here. Hey, Lynn, how are you? It's good to see you. Glad you can be here. Spare the rod and spoil the child. Spare the rod and spoil the child is not a direct quote from the Bible, but it does come from verses such as this. There are other verses about the rod and the child and discipline with children. And so, number one, this does not talk about child abuse. He's not talking about beating a child with a rod. He's not talking about having this stern discipleship that your children will fear and run from. But it is talking about the rod. Now, as we talk about a rod, the rod is used in the use of a shepherd would have a rod. Remember Psalm 23, thy rod and thy staff, they are used for correction as a shepherd controls or disciplines the sheep. And they would have the rod and they would have the staff. They would have the rod part to correct the sheep as the sheep would go astray, and he would take that rod and lead them back. The staff was there to lift up the sheep. But the rod was there. When a sheep would go astray, the shepherd would not take that rod and beat that sheep, but he would correct that sheep. Thy rod and thy staff in Psalm 23, thy rod and thy staff, he didn't say the rod and the staff beat me. He said the rod and the staff comfort me, because discipline is there. And so we use discipline. Thy rod, yes, but it's not always that you have to have a rod to beat your child with. He's not talking about that. He is talking about discipline. And I would say as we are consistent in training the child, we need to be consistent in discipline also. We can't have mom saying, well, this is all right, and dad saying, well, no, this is not all right. You need to be consistent. Now, the inconsistency comes whenever grandparents get involved, right? Everything's all right with grandparents, and then we send them back to mom and dad, and they've got to detox because they've been away with the grandparents. That's grandparents' job. But mom and dad need that consistency and discipline. And it could be, I wasn't against whipping my children. I did, and they know it. But it doesn't take a whipping every time. Sometimes it's just a snapping of the fingers. Sometimes it's just a look. I'll tell you a funny story that I wasn't there when it happened, but Julie and Janet were watching an old videotape whenever our kids and all of their cousins were at Mom and Daddy's house during Christmas. And so there's 14 grandchildren opening presents and being chaotic. And you can just imagine 14 grandchildren out in the living room and getting loud. And Janet was very loud when she spoke. And something was that Janet was getting out of hand. And in the videotape, as Janet was there watching with Julie, Julie said, "Jana," and Jana just shut it down. And they were watching that, and Jana looked at Julie and said, "How did you do that?" Because like I told you in the first lesson, Jana has one just like her who is loud and rambunctious and chaotic. And Jana's like, "What happened? How is it? You just said, Jana," in the midst of that chaos, and Jana heard that voice and just shut it down. How? Well, it didn't always just take a voice. But because of consistency and discipline, it is that Jana knew. She knew that tone. She didn't have to yell at her. She didn't have to beat her. She didn't have to grab her up and take her out. But because of consistency and discipline, sometimes it just takes a word. Sometimes it just takes a look. Look now, yeah. I remember Mama's look. There were 5 of us kids lined up on a row and sitting there in church. And I'd always try to sit on the end because Mama couldn't reach me then, because she would pinch you. And Mama had the longest arms, I tell you. For a little old lady, she had long arms that she could, when it came time, she could pinch you. Sometimes it just takes a pinch. But whatever it is, parents, we need consistency in discipline. Who spares the rod, he means never disciplines. You leave a child on his own without discipline, without correction, without guidance. And that's what the rod is for, guidance. He's saying, guide your children. Correct them when they go off the path. They will go off the path. They're children. And so we need consistency and discipline because we love them. Consistency. And then Proverbs 19, verse 18. Discipline your children while there is still hope. Oh, I like that. And I forget from that while they're still young, that because they are young, they're like clay, which it can be molded and shaped, and you form that particular shape that you're after with clay, while it can be molded and shaped. Because clay, after a time, grows hard, and you cannot do anything with it. And whatever shape or mold it is, it's going to stay in that shape or mold. And so while they are still young, while there's still hope, while they still listen to you, while they still respect you, while you still have control over your children, it is that you need to discipline them, and I would say as young as possible. Someone may ask, and I was asked this one particular question at a time, when do we need to start disciplining our children? Our child is 2 years old. When do we need to start? And I'd say you're 2 years late already. Because you can't wait. They say, well, they don't really understand us. Listen, children understand a lot more than you think. And they understand discipline a lot more earlier than you think. Don't wait till they're 2 years old. That's my advice. He says here, discipline your children while there is hope. Because we want that hope. We love our children. Children, listen. Your parents love you and want what's best for you. Otherwise, it will ruin their lives. Proverbs 19, verse 18. if we don't correct, where will they learn direction in life? If not from home, from their friends at school, right? From the world, watching television and movies, and no, it needs to come from the home. And so that we train up a child in the way that he should go, that we don't spare the rod. We have correction, and we do it while they're young, while there's still hope. And then we go to the next proverb, Proverbs 6, verse 20. My son, remember your father's command and do not forsake your mother's teaching. And so as we place responsibilities on the parents as far as teaching and consistency in teaching and teaching them moral character and teaching them spirituality and growing close to God and what it means to be a Christian and such, there's also the responsibility of the child to respond in this. That not all the burden is placed upon mother and dad, because mother and dad can teach all they want and be the right example that all they want to be, but it's also children need to respond in this. And that's part of the reason when it says, train up a child in the way that he should go, they'll not depart from this, if you have a child who keeps Proverbs 6, verse 20, who listens to their parents. As I said, parents love our children and want them to go to heaven, and there's no other child on this earth that parents love more than their own. And only want what's best for their children. And only try to direct them in that being best. Now, when they're young and they respond, and then they grow older and they begin thinking on themselves and wondering whether mom and dad are really loving them like they need to love them and raising them like they need to love them and providing the right advice that they think they need, because I've told you this before. When I got to be a teenager and when I could drive, and on weekends, everybody in Genoa went up to College Hill parking lot at 7-Eleven, because it was open till 11 o'clock. That was real late for us in Genoa. Everybody, all 20 of them, went to the parking lot there at 7-Eleven on College Hill. Who had a great time. I don't know what they did. I never got to go. Mama would say, you don't need to go. I said, Mama, why not? I thought it was the best thing for me. That's the popular place to be. That's where everything can happen. Every Monday night, every Monday morning at school, people would talk about what happened at the parking lot. Not much happened, But I didn't need to be there. I didn't need to be out till 11 o'clock anyway. I thought Mom and Dad just didn't like me. But what they said was best. Sometimes we may question our parents, but don't forsake it. Remember, they love you. They want what's best for you. And so I'm talking to those who are younger. Listen to your parents. Whenever it is that they correct you and use that rod, whatever means it is, that they're doing it for your own good. And often will tell you that. And they mean it. It's because I love you, because I care for you. And so we have a responsibility with the children, as young or as old as they are. Heed that advice. You're getting advice from someone who loves you more than anyone else in the world. You go out and you have your own friends, and your own friends will have advice. And sometimes your friends will start like this. Hey Jerry, listen, we need to do this and this and this, and your parents will never know. Right? Listen, if they're offering advice and they offer that little saying, and your parents will never find out, your parents will never know, that's not good advice. Especially being raised in Genoa. My parents knew before I got back home. I don't know how they did that. Didn't even have internet. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody's car, too. They listen and heed them. Proverbs 6, verse 20. In the book of Hebrews, it talks about God disciplining His children. And it said He disciplines those He loves. Hebrews 12, verse 6. He disciplines those who He loves, and your parents discipline those they love also. Heed their advice. Proverbs 6, verse 20. And then number 5, we go to Proverbs 20, verse 7. The righteous man walks in his integrity, and his children are blessed after him. And so, parents, it is that as we discipline and as we offer advice and as we offer training and we want our children to follow after us, we need to provide that example of integrity so that they may imitate that. The righteous man walks in his integrity. And so he is a wise man. He does offer the example. He's not someone that says, well, listen, just do as I say, not as I do, kind of example. He walks in integrity. He is a man of character. He is a man to follow. And so their children are blessed when they follow after him. Mom and Dad, we have the responsibility to set that example. To say, listen, I'm not just telling you what to do, I'm showing you also. Many who are my age and older, you remember the commercial it was. And it was a commercial for cigarettes, and so you understand that a lot didn't see this. But it was that Dad and the little son, whenever Dad would sit and the way that he sat, the young boy looked at him and sat just the same way. Whenever the man was walking and he walked in that particular way, the son was there watching him and walked in that particular way. And whenever Dad grabbed a cigarette, it showed the boy grabbing a cigarette also. They imitate us. At that particular age, we parents are their heroes. Oh, that fades, but at a particular age, we are their heroes. The righteous man walks in integrity. You set the example in it. In 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1, that Paul would say, "Be ye followers of me as I am of Jesus Christ." And so Paul would say, I'm following Christ. And he set the example, and I'm following that example, and I'm setting an example of you. You follow me, and you'll be following Christ. And that's the same way that parents that we need to be with our children also, that we are imitators of Christ. As children imitate us, they're imitating Christ. They're seeing that example. They can't see Christ on earth. Jesus doesn't live here anymore on earth, but they see you. The examples. The righteous man walks in his integrity, continues walking. As I said, when you train up a child, you're consistent in that training, and part of that consistency is your lifestyle. Are you consistent? Are you consistently walking in integrity as you raise your children? And then we go to Proverbs 14, verse 26. When it says, whoever fears the Lord has a secure fortress. And I like this secure fortress, as it says. There are other scriptures that talk about, and instead of saying a secure fortress, it'll say a strong confidence. But I just want to say, our homes should be a place where children feel safe, secure, loved, encouraged. Because out in the world, they don't get that. And if they're getting it out in the world, our homes aren't what they should be. Because the world cannot offer what the home offers. It should be a place of a strong fortress, secure fortress, that our children can come to, and when they come home, there's a certain feeling about when I come home. I remember going off to college, and the first time I came home of driving down those roads, and I was getting close to home, and I remember that feeling of I've been away from home, and I'm coming home, and it was a good feeling for a young freshman in college. I made it 4 whole days before coming home. I wanted to be home. I went back to college. I didn't stay home. But I remember that feeling, just as vivid it is today as it was then. I'm coming home. That we need to provide that fortress, secure fortress of home. It's solid. It's a foundation. It's secure. I can always count on home being there for me. And for the children, it will be a refuge. There are a lot of homes that are not a refuge for children. I remember when one of our daughters came home crying. One of their best friends had told all the girls at school, my parents are getting a divorce. And that home and that secure fortress was going to be split. And our daughters needed to hear they would always have a mom and dad and a family that's secure. And I know it happens. It happens all too often. But we need a home that's united together, a place of security, a place of refuge is home. And then the last one that we have is Proverbs chapter 3, verse 9. To teach our children that it's not all about me in growing up. I know that our children are the number one in our lives, and our lives are filled with activities with our children and spending time with our children, and that's good and well, but it is that we need to teach them also it's not all about you. When he said to honor the Lord with your wealth and the first fruits of all your crops, he would say that there you need to learn to help others. You need to learn, first of all, give to God. Because it's His in the first place, right? God doesn't want our money. It's His money in the first place. God doesn't want our wealth or whatever it is that we have, our crops or first fruits. It's His in the first place. He's just lending it to us for a while, and then we are stewards of that. And how we have it and what we do with what we have matters to God. And so we give back to Him, and we give to others as God would give them also. We honor God when we give back to God and when we give to others also. Help others who are less fortunate. Be aware of that. It's not mine, mine, mine. That sounds like a 3-year-old, doesn't it? Grow up. And we have to teach them about giving, about not being selfish, of helping others. And that's what Christianity is all about, isn't it? To love your neighbor, to put your neighbor first, to help those who are less fortunate, to lift others up who need lifting. Teach them about the Lord. The Lord is. The Lord loves. The Lord gives. The Lord helps. And then we are to imitate that also. That the Lord works through us and loving and giving and helping. Well, those are 7 Proverbs. I know there are more and others which we could go to, but those are good. Laying a foundation. It's so hard raising children. You never know. Well, I say you never know. At least while they're young, it's hard to know. Am I doing all right? How's it going? How are they going to turn out? I don't know. Don't know. But while they're young, we do what we can. Read the book of Proverbs. There are other Proverbs in raising children. There are other Proverbs in being parenting and such like that. But these are 7 Proverbs, and that's a good foundation of raising your children. The best advice I would say, Mom and Dad, work together. Work together in harmony and unity in raising your children. Well, God has children too. We're all children of God by faith in Christ Jesus. Galatians chapter 3, verse 26 and 27. It said, for many of you have been baptized into Christ, have put on Christ. So are you a child of God? Have you made that decision to say, I want God to be my Father? Spiritually speaking. I want to walk in His way. I want to go home to His home. If you haven't made that decision, why not this morning? Why not say, I believe that Jesus died on the cross for my sins. I'm ready to repent of my sins. I'm ready to follow His way. I'm ready to become a child of God. Why not respond right now while we stand and while we sing?